you can't turn back the clock. We live now. We live here.
Hey, Adrian, I know where we live. What do you think, I'm stupid? I'm not as dumb as you think I am. You know, I can smell it? I see where we are. I don't want this no more.
Rocky Balboa is back where he started, fighting on the streets of Philadelphia in Rocky V, which we'll be reviewing on this edition of Siskel Ebert. And we'll also have an interview with director Gary Marshall, the man who made Pretty Woman, and has his own theories about Hollywood's love affair with a happy ending. I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune. Our first film is Rocky V, and it's a sometimes pleasing finale for the series. Pleasing when it gives us back the original Rocky of the streets that captivated us in the first movie. This final chapter opens with Rocky punch-drunk from the fight in Rocky IV.
I can't.
You're fine.
I can't stop my hands from shaking.
His brain is damaged and he retires. Then, when bad investments force him back to his Philadelphia neighborhood, Rocky turns trainer, helping a young fighter, a young Rocky named Tommy Gunn, battle for a title shot.
Shut up! Listen, the only difference between the hero and the coward is the hero's willing to go for it, all right? Willing to take the shot, okay? Now this guy over here is scared too. You're scared, he's scared, you're both scared. Remember?
Rocky becomes so involved with this young fighter, he stops paying attention to his son, played by Stallone's real son, Sage.
You don't worry about it.
I gotta worry about it. I mean, the deal was we were supposed to be tight, right?
What about Tommy? You tight with him too, huh?
But when Tommy becomes champ, a Don King-type promoter tries to manipulate a fight between him and Rocky.
This guy here, he was using you for the bait. He wants to get you and me in the ring. That's what he wants us to fight each other, you know, to make the money, right? He don't care about you, Tommy don't care about me neither.
That side of him in the hat is kind of sweet, especially when you know it's probably going to be the last time you'll see it. The two big fights in the movie are also very well done, and Rocky's moments in the street are effective. What's missing, I think, here is a big love scene between Rocky and his wife, Adrian. Love scenes, I think, are as important as fights in this series, and I also would have loved to have seen the more daring ending that was originally planned in the film. It's received a lot of publicity, in which Rocky dies in Adrian's arms. Still, I like this guy with his dumb hat, and I vote thumbs up on the movie.
I vote a thumbs down, Gene. I thought that the structure of the film was completely predictable from the other films. And although I like the fact that he's got his hat on again and he's back on the streets of Philadelphia, that was only a reminder to me of the richness and the texture and the humor and the humanity of the dialogue and the characters in the first movie, Rocky, which, remember, won the Academy Award for Best Picture of the Year. And now it's just a series. You have to find a new villain every time. You have to end with a big fight. The pieces are all just plugged in. There's no real juice in this movie.
Okay, well, I was fooled by the fight in the picture. It doesn't end technically with the fight, and I enjoyed the ending that was chosen. It goes in a different direction. The other thing is, I think that there is a lot of his humor is still in the film, that character's humor. And when he walks through the streets, the only thing that I think is wrong with it is that it is missing the love element that was so strong, not only in one, but in two.
Well, the whole love was the subject of the first Rocky.
I believe so.
And Adrian, ever since then, has been kind of put on the shelf. And it always seemed to me like if it were Adrian and Rocky facing the world, they'd be stronger pictures.
Number two had that. This one could have used it.
Okay, I sat down and I had a long talk with myself after I saw our next movie, which is named Child's Play 2. And I found myself having an argument between my head and my heart. My head told me that this movie did indeed deliver the goods, that it was a truly frightening thriller and it was a well-made film. But my heart told me the movie was sick and unwholesome, a completely malignant exercise. The movie, once again, tells the story of a little boy who's terrorized by an evil doll, a doll named Chucky, that contains the mind and soul of a mass murderer. The violent and malicious doll was destroyed at the end of the first movie, but now Chucky is back.
I told you, we were going to be friends to the end, and now it's time to play.
This is a movie in which a little boy's mother is taken away from him and he lives with foster parents and is blamed for the death of one of them. And everywhere he goes, people are killed and mutilated and nobody will believe him. And this Chucky doll is pure evil, unadulterated, profane, and foul-mouthed evil. The closing sequence of Child's Play 2 inside a toy factory is truly horrifying. It's good filmmaking, but it made me feel unclean and disturbed as I was watching it, and I can only imagine what effect it might have on small children. As a film critic, I have to say this movie is well made and effective, But as a human being, I wish I hadn't seen it. What good can come of having such foul and ugly images pumped into your mind?
I think that my heart and my mind may be closer connected than yours. I don't make too much of a distinction. I thought that I was laughing at the film because it was so preposterous when they have that little doll attacking with a knife. At the same time, it's sickening. And so I didn't think that the filmmaking was pretty good. The only thing I'll grant you is the final fight in the toy factory is well staged because you have all the boxes and that's
and the assembly line and all the other stuff.
Okay, yes. that part. But that's the end of the picture. All of the other setup involving the doll is really silly, and again, I must stress how violently abusive the doll is and how sickening the role that an actual child has to play opposite.
Even then you're contradicting yourself, because if it's silly, then it wouldn't be violently abusive. It's more than silly, Gene.
Oh, no.
It's really sick.
I have a knee-jerk response to showing children in jeopardy, and it is cheap, it is rarely justified, and in this piece of trash, it's not justified
my only point would be that the movie is even worse because it's so well made. You have to grant it, it's well made, and
only in the last sequence. Coming up next, the new John Hughes family comedy, Home Alone, with a little boy abandoned in his suburban home for the holidays. More trouble for kids.
Are you here all by yourself? Sam, I'm 8 years old. You think I'd be here alone? Kevin!
That's little Macaulay Culkin left alone in his suburban home when his family leaves him behind for a Christmas holiday in Paris. And that's the premise of the dopey new comedy, Home Alone. How does it all happen? Well, there's a lot of confusion when the big family, a couple of them have been combined for this trip, they all oversleep the morning they're supposed to go to the airport.
There's no way on earth we're going to make this plane. It leaves in 45 minutes.
Left alone in the big house, at first, the little boy tries to be a brave little man.
I can't seem to find my toothbrush, so I'll pick one up when I go out today. Other than that, I'm in good shape.
A more immediate problem, a couple of bungling burglars, Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern, who have been casing the neighborhood for empty homes during the holidays. This is the first time Pesci has ever given a bad performance. It's a bad role.
It's loaded. It's got lots of top flight goods, stereos, VCRs, toys. Probably looking at some very fine jewelry, possible cash hoard, odd marketable securities.
The film also reaches for some obvious tenderness, giving the kid a creepy next-door neighbor who's rumored to be a mass murderer. But is he? They meet in church.
Well, this is the place to be if you're feeling bad about yourself.
It is?
I think so.
Are you feeling bad about yourself?
Of course, that old man is not a mass murderer, and I have a question, that whole scene about the little boy feeling bad about himself. He's obviously the most wonderful kid in the whole picture. The slapstick with the burglars in the picture, that's predictable. I could accept the premise of the whole film, I'll grant him that, but I just don't think a bright enough script was written with the kid being maybe more frightened than he would be, and maybe even more clever. Writer-producer John Hughes and his director Chris Columbus have made a sort of a preteen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and the formula is wearing thin on me.
I think I would have liked the movie more if it had been much more realistic.
Yes,
what would really happen if a little kid were left home alone? And the whole business of the burglars trying to break in, and he contrives a very elaborate string of booby traps and trick ropes going here and there, and little fireworks that are going to go off and so forth to make life hard for them. These booby traps are nothing that any 8-year-old kid couldn't make if he had hundreds of thousands of dollars and the special effects department of a movie working for him. It's totally unrealistic. And because it goes into that weird subplot involving the burglars and the booby traps and so forth, it lost my interest. What would happen if an 8-year-old really were left home alone for 3 days? That would be a good movie.
And I was all excited because that, of course, was one of my, and I'm sure everyone else's, big fears. I mean, when your parents go out the first time and there's no babysitter, that is a big moment in every kid's life. And I thought this movie was going to tap into it, and instead we get slapstick and we get a phony thing with a mass murder.
Coming up later in the program, Pretty Woman is now one of the biggest hits of 1990, but the original draft of that screen is about a young woman who wants to write an essay about what happened in her town during the Nazi era. To her confusion, she finds that nobody wants her to stir up those old memories from the past. The heroine, named Sonia, was Always a little advanced for her age, and as a schoolgirl, she fell in love with her teacher, who later returns to the town, and they're married. But as Sonia's investigation continues, the mood of the town turns ugly. The town officials don't want her to go poking around, and they try to frustrate her research in the local archives.
Die Zumtobelakten. Die sind ausgelegt.
Bis wann?
6 bis 8 Wochen.
One of the key scenes in the movie reveals that a local clergyman, hired as a resistance fighter, was actually responsible for anti-Semitic acts during the 1930s.
Nur wegen dem Herrn Pater Brummel habe ich den Namen nicht sagen wollen.
Der Pater Brummel hat auf ihre Trauung die Orgel gespielt. Sie sollten sich schämen.
The Nasty Girl uses a strange style to tell its story. It contains painful and controversial subject matter, but the filmmaker, Michael Verhoeven, has it all narrated in a conversational, detached style by the heroine. We see her standing on the walls of monuments of her town and describing events as if they were happening in some kind of fable. And this distancing effect is fashionable right now, I know, as a way of creating an ironic space between a movie and its subject matter, but the story contained in The Nasty Girl was potentially so strong that I think the most effective style would have been straightforward realism. Here's a movie that gets in the way of its own message.
You know, I think if that movie had been made in the more traditional way that you're talking about, I think then we could have said, oh, come on, we've seen that story before. We know the German people, or many of them, have tried to hide past involvements. What are we learning here new? I think what this director does is use a little humor, takes a more realistic situation, just like you were talking about in the last picture, oddly enough, Home Alone, where here's a girl, a real person, she's got some problems, she also has a sense of humor about the thing, she's trying to, actually she's trying to succeed in her little craft, she sort of stumbles upon this little secret, it's not her sole search, this is not a heavy-handed film. I thought that approach was fresh.
This movie doesn't give you an emotional payoff, it doesn't generate anger, it doesn't generate indignation, it's an exercise in style. It's not an indignant movie in a direct way.
I think you can feel the anger real quickly when you're taken in surprise and see what's being withheld from her. I felt that.
Coming up next, in honor of Rocky V's reconfigured upbeat ending, we're going to talk with the director of Pretty Woman, another happy ending movie, about how this script's ending was changed too. And that
happier ending given to Rocky V. Sylvester Stallone originally wanted Rocky to die, and he wrote his original script that way, but the studio said, no, everyone wants to have a good time at the movies, you don't kill legends. But all too often, I think Hollywood filmmakers confuse a good time with a happy ending. I prefer what I call life goes on endings every once in a while, maybe more than every once in a while. Endings where some problems may be resolved, but not all of them. An ending like in one of my most favorite movies.
Was it in the nature of a serious offense? For example, was it in the nature of a felony or a misdemeanor?
Well, it was in the nature of shoplifting.
In The Last Detail, for example, Jack Nicholson and Otis Young, playing two career sailors, take a young sailor, Randy Quaid, to prison. Now, a conventional happy ending would have had the kid escape at the end, but instead he does go to jail. And as the movie ends, Nicholson and Young walk off their separate ways as a black and white man.
I don't know. Stop up in Baltimore, maybe? You?
Back to New York, I guess.
It's a hard, realistic, open-ended ending that makes the film linger in the mind. A happy ending would have made it just another fairy tale. Speaking of fairy tales, Pretty Woman is the most successful fairy tale this year at the box office. The original script, however, did not call for a happy ending between hooker Julia Roberts and businessman Richard Gere. In the original story, she was drug addicted at the end, and he left her. I asked the film's director, Gary Marshall, to defend his happy ending.
I'm the kind of guy that likes endings that are undecided. Life goes on. Are you?
I'm the kind of guy that likes a happy ending. I like a more positive ending, but it doesn't wrap everything else up. It just is more, I like to end with hope and with a certain positiveness.
Would Pretty Woman have been a better film? A film that would last longer in public consciousness and people would be studying it and treasuring it 100 years from now if the ending had been more lifelike, more uncertain?
My opinion, no. I watch the public and I see that they go to see it time and time again.
Are you aware of the ending of Casablanca?
Well, Casablanca made me feel good because they had as many endings as I did, and they reshot it a few times. At the end, they did get together, and the audience said, we don't like that. Or somebody said. And then they said, okay, and he walked off into walked away. She took off, and he walked away. Unrequited love.
Bye, right?
Don't hurry, you'll miss that plane.
I thought that was the right ending.
Would it be made today?
Depends on the actors in it. Certain actors, I would say Jack Nicholson, Meryl Streep, it would be made just like that today. Maybe Julia Roberts and Mel Gibson, it wouldn't be made that way.
Marshall also believes that the conditions present in the 1990s call for more happy endings than in years past.
To be very serious, the fact that society now, it's dangerous to make love in society today. So we're back to monogamy, where you have one girl, you get married, marriage is back. Falling in love is back, because if you don't, you could die. So this is a good reason to fall today, because you could get in trouble and die from whatever's going on out there. This is a part, I think, of why romance and a positive mood, maybe, at least in the romantic area, is prevailing around the country.
I don't think a fear of age is the reason why people are suddenly interested in romantic movies. I think they'll always want them if they're well done. But I do prefer challenging endings. If Rocky had died at the end of Rocky V, that would have been a great, memorable moment. I mean, the audacity to kill him off. With Pretty Woman, well, the ending is fine if you believe in fairy tales. With prostitutes, a lot of people don't. My bias, however, is for the up-in-the-air ending of a kind of a movie like The Fabulous Baker Boys. It was exciting when you didn't know whether Michelle Pfeiffer and Jeff Bridges were going to get together. I had something to think about when I'm walking up the aisle. But then, of course, I'm not in the business of wanting to see pictures that make money. I want to see a film that I can talk about after I leave the theater, and a happy ending doesn't always provide that. In fact, it pretty much kills
the movie is all over when the happy ending is there, and then you go out, and it's not even really a happy ending. Now, I think Casablanca has had a happier ending than Pretty Woman, because at the end of Casablanca, it's real complex. These people have to decide between their selfish love interest and the good of Western democracy and freedom. And I think that if Ingrid Bergman hadn't gotten on that plane, we wouldn't have been able to like either her or Humphrey Bogart. So, in a way, a conventional happy ending where they jump into each other's arms isn't happy enough. It's got to be an ending that actually causes us to think about things like you're saying.
I think the most fascinating thing is what he said is how if the film Casablanca were cast today differently. Okay, Streep and Nicholson, yes, they're mature. But Robertson, he says Mel Gibson, I think he's right. They would have gotten together. And there's something, it's like they're kids. Like today's movie stars are kids.
Well, just wait until they remake Casablanca on television. They'll give you a nice dumb ending for it, I'm sure. Before she was a pretty woman, however, Julia Roberts was a very smart teenage girl. And we're going to review her first big movie break when we come back. Woman, and it made a star out of Julia Roberts. But look at this scene. This is the same Julia Roberts 2 years ago in a charming human comedy named Mystic Pizza, which shows her same star quality. She plays one of three close friends who are working in a pizza parlor in the last summer before they go to college, and the movie tells the story of her first uncertain steps into the world of grown-up romance. But the movie also showcases two other very big talents, Annabeth Gish and Lily Taylor as her best friends. Mystic Pizza is wonderfully entertaining, and I recommend that you rent it. Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed on the show. We had a split decision on Rocky V. Gene was surprised and excited by the big fight, but I found the movie too predictable. 2 thumbs down for the gruesome and sick thriller Child's Play 2, which uses a kid for target practice. 2 more thumbs down for Home Alone, which might have been more realistic, and another split decision on The Nasty Girl, where we disagreed on the effectiveness of having the heroine tell her own story.
Well, so you didn't like anything this week. Rocky V, I think it's more than just a fight. I enjoyed the humor of the picture. I enjoyed seeing him in the street. I enjoyed one discussion he has with his kid. It's a good film.
Well, if I were going to recommend a movie this week, I would recommend Dances with Wolves from last week's show.
Well, that's a better film. That's it for this week. Next time we'll review the sequel 3 Men and a Little Lady, featuring the same cast of bachelors, and also the drama Mr. and Mrs. Bridge, starring another Mr. and Mrs. Paul.